Milestones in Medicine is produced by American Medical Video, which is solely responsible for its content. Milestones in Medicine is produced by American Medical Video, which is solely responsible for its content. This Milestones in Medicine program is funded through a grant provided by Park Davis.
Coronary disease is not a problem for most people on the planet. It's a problem for practical purposes only in the population groups that are meat eaters. And I'm convinced that man, that is human beings, are not meant to be meat eaters. I think we're basically a herbivorous animal, not a carnivorous animal.
Welcome back to our Milestones in Medicine series on cholesterol and coronary atherosclerosis. In our first program, Dr. William Roberts, chief of the pathology branch at the National Institutes of Health, reviewed a formidable collection of evidence implicating elevated serum cholesterol levels as a major cause of atherosclerotic heart disease. In today's program, Dr. Roberts talks about the need to alter our society's dietary habits if we're to escape what he refers to as the plague of the 20th century. As we heard in our last program, one of the most effective means of reducing the chances of developing atherosclerotic heart disease is to lower the total and LDL cholesterol levels. But how do we do that? Well, there's now ample evidence indicating that what we eat and how we live may be the key. In addition to experimental and clinical data, anthropological observations support the need for lifestyle modifications in our society. During our conversation with Dr. Roberts, he called our attention to the work of a team of medical anthropologists who have compared and contrasted the living habits of Paleolithic man and the bush people of Africa with those of modern man.
The lessons that they've learned from studying those bush people, it seems to me, are very applicable to our present society. Now, the points they make are these, in essence, and that is that our bodies presumably were formed 35,000, 40,000 or so years ago in response to our environs. And subsequently, our environs, of course, have changed enormously. But there's no evidence whatsoever that modern human beings genetically have changed one iota since we became relatively widespread about 35,000 years ago. So we have a major mismatch on our hands. We've got the same genetic makeup as we had when we had no paved roads, when there was no agriculture, when there was no industry, and so on. Now, the Stone Agers, number one, did a lot of exercise. They were on their feet most of the day. They were hunter-gatherers. The men went out to do the killing, and the women went out to do the gathering for the most part. So mobility was common. Very few were obese, apparently. Very, very few. Now, the animals that they killed, of course, were red meat. But they were not domesticated like our cattle are today. Our domesticated cattle are absolutely loaded with fat and hormones and antibiotics and all these toxins. They ate the wild beasts, that of course the red meat, but there was relatively little fat in the animal running wild. They ate a lot of berries, a lot of vegetables, and they didn't eat meat every day. It was predicted they ate meat once every 3 days or once every 4 days. When the men would come back with a kill, the community that they lived with would be cheering. In other words, it was an exception to eat meat, not a daily ritual like we do now. And the evidence is that atherosclerosis was non-existent among the Stone Ages.
In one of his recent editorials appearing in the American Journal of Cardiology, Dr. Roberts pointed out that our cardiovascular health is most dependent on what goes into our mouths. We asked him to speculate on how a radical alteration in dietary habits would affect the health of Americans.
Suppose we were pure vegetarians in this country over several decades. What would be some of the diseases that we wouldn't get compared to the meat eaters, which most of us are? Well, the pure vegetarians don't get atherosclerosis. That'd save us a lot of money. Pure vegetarians over several decades don't get systemic hypertension. Pure vegetarians over several decades are not obese. For practical purposes, they don't get diabetes. They don't get peptic ulcer disease. They don't get appendicitis, diverticulosis, gallbladder problems, irritable bowel syndrome. Pure vegetarians don't get gallstones, kidney stones. The frequency of osteoarthritis in pure vegetarians is almost non-existent. In this country, the average woman by age 65 has lost 35% of her skeleton by age 65. Why? Because she's not taking in enough calcium? No. The evidence is strong that it's because she's taking in too much protein from being a meat eater. And the more protein we take in, the more calcium goes out. So we probably wouldn't have osteoarthritis and degenerating joints and backs and that kind of thing, where we ought to be pure vegetarians. And coarse salmonellosis and trichinosis we wouldn't have.
Well, since it's unlikely that most Americans are going to embrace a strictly vegetarian diet, at least in the foreseeable future, Dr. Roberts offered some practical advice on changing our eating habits. In doing so, he also pointed out some misconceptions about so-called low cholesterol diets.
The average American takes in about 1/2 gram of cholesterol a day. The average Stone Ager apparently also took in about 1/2 gram of cholesterol a day. As a matter of fact, I don't worry so much about cholesterol. These books that are titled Low Cholesterol Diets, cholesterol is not the problem. Fat is the problem. We take in, as mentioned, only about 1/2 gram of cholesterol a day, whereas we take in, the average American, over 100 grams of fat a day. Some of us as much as 150 grams of fat a day, and about 1/3 of that is saturated. And in essence, when that saturated fat comes into our bodies, it's converted into cholesterol. And that is our big source of cholesterol, not the cholesterol that we take in directly. As a matter of fact, if we would give up the visible and non-visible eggs we take in, we would eliminate half the cholesterol we take in. If we'd give up red meat, we'd eliminate a 1/3 of it. Whereas fat, the fatty acids and oils we put on a lot of things are loaded with fat. Red meat makes up about 1/3 of the fat we take in.
The unhealthy dietary habits of many Americans have been attributed in great part to the fast pace of our society and our desire for foods that are tasty yet require minimal preparation.
20% of Americans eat their lunch every day at a fast food chain, 13% their supper, and 5% begin their day at breakfast at a fast food chain. So a lot of us go to the fast food restaurants. There's nothing wrong with eating fast as far as I know. We're a mobile society. Both husband and wife work over half the homes now, so to have these opportunities to eat quickly, relatively inexpensively, relatively predictably, is a nice thing. But the food can clearly be better. Some of the foods that we are able to get in the fast food chain too high in fat, too high in calories, too high in salt, too high in sugar. Now, most places, people, when we go into a fast food chain, of course, get some French fries. Now, you know, a baked potato is one of the best things we can eat. Baked potato averages about 100 calories. It's 1% fat. But when you chop it up and cook it in beef tallow, and most of the fast food places cook it in beef tallow, which is 52% fat, it quadruples or may quadruple, or at least double or triple, the caloric count of that baked potato.
Another fast food item that clearly contributes to elevated cholesterol levels is the ever-popular hamburger. In his crusade against the potential health hazards of fast foods, Dr. Roberts frequently refers to the Fast Food Guide, which details the nutritional information of the foods and drinks served by the top 15 fast food chains in America. After just a glance at the ingredients in some of the items, it's apparent why one of the more popular triple cheeseburgers has been referred to as a coronary artery bypass special. Many of the oversized burgers contain anywhere from 500 to more than 1,000 calories and up to 15 teaspoons of saturated fat. Sodium content ranges from 900 to nearly 2,000 milligrams. As public awareness of the dangers of such a diet increases, Dr. Roberts sees major changes ahead in the fast food industry.
They don't want to give bad food. They obviously want to make a living, and most Americans want hamburgers. But there's nothing wrong with a soybean hamburger, and I think they're going to have that. You can get a vegetarian hamburger in a few years from one of these places. So they're going to bring us better food. I'm convinced.
In addition to excessive consumption of red meat and related foods, the consumer must also recognize that dairy products may also contribute to elevations in serum cholesterol.
Dairy products, anything from animals, loaded with cholesterol. Milk, for example, in this country, low-fat milk, 2% milk, we've all see that. Well, that's bunk. That means 2% as a percent of weight, and 87% of milk is water. Fat is lighter than water, so it floats to the top. But 2% or low-fat milk as a percent of calories from fat is 33% fat as a percent of calories. So there's really no low-fat milk as such. Whole milk is 3.5% fat by weight, but 50% fat as a percent of calories. The only good milk is skim milk. We shouldn't allow any milk in our homes, as far as I'm concerned, other than skim milk.
For the consumer who's concerned about the fat content of meat items, Dr. Roberts recommends fish as an alternative.
The beauty of fish is that there's no saturated fat there. If you take a gram of red meat, a gram of chicken, a gram of turkey, a gram of fish, the amount of cholesterol in each of those grams is roughly the same. But there's no saturated fat in fish, and that's what's good about fish. Maybe some of the oils are also beneficial.
While diet represents the cornerstone for achieving and maintaining a healthy cholesterol level, adequate exercise is also important in reducing the risk of heart disease.
There's no question, if you exercise, you sleep better, feel better, don't need to sleep quite as much. Everything works better. Cholesterol level, total cholesterol goes down, HDL cholesterol goes up, body weight goes down, blood pressure goes down. Exercise has tremendous value. I think the maintenance of ideal body weight or close to it is one of the major responsibilities of adults on the planet. And the less we weigh, the less cholesterol we take in, the less fat we take in. If one is an exerciser, let's say a runner, and one runs 5 miles and then stops at one of the fast food chains on the way home after a 5-mile run, I think it neutralizes it. It's not health in and of itself. I personally think that it's probably more healthful to be a non-exercising pure vegetarian than it is to be an exercising meat eater.
So far, our discussion has focused on dietary measures to prevent atherosclerotic heart disease. Well, what should be done for those individuals who already have symptomatic coronary disease?
I do believe the person who's had atherosclerotic events should be considered very strongly for lipid-lowering drug therapy at that time. As a matter of fact, and I don't say that lightly, because, for example, we have something like 5.5 to 7.5 million people in this country with symptomatic myocardial ischemia. Now, let's say we just took 4 million of that number and put them on a lipid-lowering drug, or a combination of 2 lipid-lowering drugs. We're talking about a lot of money. But bypass operation is an awful lot of money, and we had 200,000 of them in this country last year. And we had over 100,000 coronary angioplasties last year, and that's a lot of money also. The lipid-lowering drugs, we're just beginning there. The list is about 6 now. I think in the next 5 years it'll be 10. The combination of some of these drugs will drop LDL cholesterol by 50%. 50%. I think the frequency of coronary events are going to progressively fall off. But the big challenge is to change our eating habits, our life habits, our living styles, and that's going to be tough.
The elderly represent another special group with regard to elevated serum cholesterol and atherosclerosis. Dr. Roberts believes that calcific deposits that commonly form on the aortic valve and mitral annulus of older individuals are a form of atherosclerosis, and that they're related to serum cholesterol levels.
I believe that calcific deposits in the aortic valve cusp and in the mitral annulus in older people is atherosclerotic in origin. And the reason I say that is this. If one looks at the coronary arteries in people who have mitral annular calcium and they're over 65 years of age, 100% of them will have calcific deposits in their coronary arteries. And coronary artery calcium means that the calcium is in the atherosclerotic plaques. You don't get calcium in the media of coronary arteries. Number two, if you take patients who have calcium deposits in the aortic valve, and if they are over 65 years of age, 100% of them will also have calcific deposits in the coronary arteries. Again, the calcium in the coronary arteries is occurring only within atherosclerotic plaques. I think about it as the senile cardiac calcification syndrome, and that is in our lipid-laden environs, most of us, as we get older, will have calcium in our coronary arteries. We will have calcium in our mitral annulus, and we will have calcium in our aortic valve.
In response to the increasing concern about the dangers of elevated serum cholesterol levels, several programs have been launched to increase public awareness of the cholesterol issue. In addition, detailed recommendations on the detection, evaluation, and treatment of high blood cholesterol in adults have recently been published by the National Cholesterol Education Program of the National Institutes of Health. We asked Dr. Roberts to comment on the nationwide effort to educate physicians and the public about the importance of identifying and treating individuals with high blood cholesterol.
Well, I think the National Cholesterol Education Program is wonderful, and it's really just beginning. It's like hypertension program in the early 70s. In 1972, only 15 out of every 100 Americans who were hypertensive were having their blood pressure controlled. And only about half of them knew that they had hypertension. Most of the people in this country with hypercholesterolemia now don't know they have it.
During these programs, we've heard powerful evidence incriminating elevated serum cholesterol as a major cause of atherosclerotic heart disease. We've also heard Dr. Roberts' strong views on the urgent need to modify those lifestyle issues that lead to high blood cholesterol levels. We now conclude our series with a commentary from Dr. Antonio Gatto, chairman of the Department of Medicine of Methodist Hospital and Baylor College of Medicine, and co-editor of Milestones in Medicine.
The Surgeon General's Report on Nutrition and Health 1988 contains the following recommendation concerning food products. The public would benefit from increased availability of foods and food products, low in calories, total fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, sodium, and sugars, but high in a variety of natural forms of fiber and perhaps certain minerals and vitamins. Food manufacturers can contribute to improving the quality of the American diet by increasing the availability of palatable, easily prepared food products that will help people to follow the dietary principles outlined here. What we have here then is a recommendation that the food producers participate in a national program to make available products which an individual can obtain and can eat in order to achieve a healthier lifestyle. We've reached a consensus in this country. The consensus is that lowering cholesterol is important and that the most important way, the most significant way of achieving a reduction of cholesterol is through diet. We now have a coalition that has as its objective obtaining a healthier diet for the American public. We've been moving in this direction for the past 25 years, thanks largely to the influence of the American Heart Association. The AHA has been recommending a diet for all Americans above the age 2 that's lower in saturated fat and cholesterol, that is lower in calories for people who are overweight, and now we have a consensus that has been reached in that the government and the Surgeon General agree with these recommendations and have endorsed them. The National Cholesterol Education Program of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute represents an effort to put together the branch of the government that deals with health with the voluntary health agencies. So we have the government, including the NIH and the Surgeon General. We have the voluntary health agencies, such as the American Heart Association, and we have the food producers who are working together to make available to you and to me and to those who are interested food products which we can buy and prepare meals in our home, and food products which can be used in restaurants and fast food chains to provide us with a way of following a healthier lifestyle.
This Milestones in Medicine program has been funded through a grant provided by Park Davis. Milestones in Medicine is produced by American Medical Video, which is solely responsible for its content. Milestones in Medicine is proud to offer this month's programs in special library editions. A 1-hour video cassette of both programs is available for $39.95, an audio cassette for $19.95, and a complete set of transcripts for $12.95. Call 1-800-228-1080 and use your major credit card to place your order. Videocassette versions of the programs are recorded on durable, professional quality videotape and are packaged in a handsome storage case. Audio cassettes can turn your driving time into productive time. Program transcripts are professionally printed on bond paper for easy reading and reference. Call 1-800-228-1080 now to order the library edition of your choice. Operators are standing by to assist you. Please have your credit card handy.